So, well, they introduce themselves. We have Joy, Carolyn, and Martha presenting today. I think it was valuable to invite them to talk because they have a national center that focuses on reutilization of assistive technologies, and they have a program, Tools for Life, which is one of the leading programs in the country. So we thought that the story should be told. And actually, I would just like before I pass the presentation to you, I'd just like to rephrase or tell you the slogan that the program has, or actually the center has, which I find it very interesting. It says, behind every reused AT device, there's a story to be told, a dream being realized, and a goal being met. So I really like it. And I thought that actually your presentation was about to focus on that, telling us the story and sharing, the dreams that you have realized with many people. So looking forward. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Claudia. And we're really thrilled to be here and look forward to sharing with you a little bit about our dream with AT reuse and how it came to be. And so with that, what we're going to be focusing on today, and we'd love to come back sometime and talk with you about all our initiatives with Tools for Life, which is the State Assistive Technology Act program. And with about a half an hour, we figure this is a small amount of time to cover a whole lot of information about kind of how we came to be, how reuse came to be, its national focus, who's involved, what's happening, prevalence, and looking at the purpose and activities of our center, and then also to have that time at the end to have some conversations about, how can we collaborate with Georgia Tech and with some of the things that you're doing. Starting out, when we define assistive technology, it's assistive technology as well as durable medical equipment. So when we say assistive technology, it's anything from software to help people with disabilities, to wheelchairs, to adapted homes, which some of you are involved in. It's that whole big gamut that we call assistive technology. And that was really defined in the AT Act of 1988. Reutilized AT, and we're going to get into some other definitions that go dig a little bit deeper later on, but it's any item, piece of equipment that's used again. Okay? So it's just very simply, that's reutilized AT. Who's involved in it? Centers for Independent Living, churches, groups like our internationally known Friends of Disabled Adults and Children here in Georgia. If anybody's interested in seeing that particular group and what they're doing and how they're doing it, we have 2 reuse programs here in Georgia that have really been sort of highlighted as national examples of AT reuse. So there are lots of people doing this. Historical foundations, back in the 1980s, there were groups doing reutilization. Friends of Disabled Adults and Children, I think you were founded in 1986. The National Christina Foundation, which has done a lot with computer reuse, began to start talking with corporations about how we could reuse this stuff, keep it out of landfills, and assist people with disabilities get what they couldn't afford to always get themselves. Then in 1988, the federal law for the Technology Act was passed, and that authorized all states and territories to develop programs to really help bring assistive technology to people to make that happen. And so in the 1990s, there were a lot of these state programs, including our efforts here in Georgia, that began getting involved with reuse. And then in the late 1990s and also in 2000, there were several reuse summits sponsored by a group that some of you may know. It's called RESNA, Rehab Engineers of North America is what the tagline used to be. And after that, then Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005. It was kind of a perfect storm. What happened with Katrina was there were lots of people with disabilities who lost their dreams in that one evening or in over a period of several days. There were some people that we know of who lost their lives because they were in wheelchairs and the floodwaters came into their homes. They had no way to escape. Our partner program for Tools for Life is a group in Louisiana, and they all of a sudden were set with this issue of how do we replace devices that people have lost, those who lived. And Friends of Disabled Adults and Children was scrambling to get equipment that was needed, reused clean equipment to Katrina victims. So that was sort of a perfect storm. And so the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services, which is in the U.S. Department of Education, that's the group that was sponsoring all the AT-ACT programs all over the country. They basically said, hey, you know, we need to do something about this. We have a lot of state AT programs that are doing reuse, but we need to do more effort because there's a lot we don't know about what's going on with reuse. So they funded 12 demonstration grant projects on a competitive basis. And we're happy to say that Georgia got one of those, and Friends of Disabled Adults and Children, and Tools for Life was very much involved in that. And it's really to demonstrate, you know, safe and effective and appropriate reuse and what that would mean. You know, what does that look like? They also funded a technical assistance project, and that was the birth of the Pass It On Center. We competed with other programs. We were awarded that grant. It's a 5-year grant. We're in a 6-year extension, and we're working on sustainability plans because the truth is there's so many groups across the United States that have said, you guys need to continue what we're doing. We've begun to scratch the surface. There's so much more we need to do. And so OSERS also supported the first National AT Reuse Conference in 2006 at the Georgia Tech Hotel and Conference Center. And there were about 200 people from all over the country who came and really talked about what are the challenges with AT reuse. And I'm going to go through this very, very quickly, but when we talked together, we found that we don't know the legal issues surrounding this. We don't understand the federal regulatory issues. There's CDC has laws about this, the FDA does. You know, what kind of liability will this pose to the programs? What are the implications for consumers and agencies of device reuse? If Medicaid reuses devices, what does that mean? You know, what are consumers going to think about that? When I say consumers, we're talking about individuals with disabilities and also their circles of support, their family members, their agencies. What's the net effect on the DMA industry? We don't want to put anybody out of business. What is the value of these devices? You know, what's the cost benefits of doing AT reuse? How can a small nonprofit afford to do this so they can stay in business and do it properly? What makes a good reuse program? How do we know when reuse is being done safely, effectively, and appropriately? And how much is this going on? We knew that there were programs across the country. In fact, there were about 86 programs, I think, that were identified as doing some form of AT reuse. So when the Pass It On Center received its funding in 2006, we formed a national advisory task force, and that group came together. One of the very first things we did is we need to look at the definitions, because guess what? A lot of these programs are saying they're doing recycling. But when you look at recycling, what does that mean? That's end of life. That's where you dispose parts in, you know, at the very end of life. And so we identified a number of different definitions. Device exchange programs, those are kind of like want ads, eBay. You go up on Craigslist, you'll see people putting wheelchairs up there. Device open loan programs, our AT programs were loaning devices out that would just stay out and not come back. Or if they came back, then they would be, you know, put out again. But it's just sort of a loan program. Reassignment, where devices come into a program, they're just basically cleaned, maybe a tire is inflated, and if it's a wheelchair, and it's given to the person, you know, who needs it next. Refurbishment, we came up with a definition. It's where we're not only cleaning, we're looking at it, we're maybe getting parts from the manufacturer, replacing parts, replacing upholstery, replacing batteries, and there's a higher cost to remanufacturing. And then we talked about recycling. So we came up with those definitions. And what I'm going to do at this point is turn it over to Carolyn to talk about some of the activities that we've been involved in.
All right, thank you, Joy. So glad to meet with y'all today, and this is my first DATHA meeting, so I'm glad to be here. So what we really wanted to do is come up with tools that are going to help folks so that they can do a great job in helping other folks meet the needs of individuals in their own communities. So we started reaching out and saying, hey, where are these groups that are doing reuse, and how are they doing it? And coming up with different tools, and you'll see some of those in just a second. And one of them was creating this finding reuse locations. So we started out with about 80, and it's grown. So we have over 200 centers that we're connected with in all the states and territories. There are a couple that don't have any reuse activities that have been listed here, and we're working with them. And we created this database where you can search for specific types of devices. You can search for ages. You can go in and say, you know what, the person I'm working with is 55 or older. They're looking for something for vision. Who does that? And then you could click a button and see who does that in the United States. You could also see specific states. So the way this has worked is whenever we've had folks in other states that, you know, a lot of us are transient. We have folks all over the country that we care about and we love. And so they could go up there and look and see, oh, you know, I'm caring for somebody in Florida. I live in Georgia. Who in Florida does this? So connecting folks that way. So right now, 207 different reuse groups out there. 123 conduct reassignment activities. And then the rest of this, you'll have access to this PowerPoint if you would like it. But it gives you the breakout as to what are these activities and who's doing that. Here's the website. We were thrilled because when we got the grant, we started designing the website. And we had the website up in a month, just a basic website. And then it's grown and grown and grown. And you'll hear some of the stats from that as far as how many folks are visiting our website and how much time they're spending. It's exciting because folks are spending an average of 12 minutes on our website, which is a dream if you, you know, are a web designer. You're like, wow, 12 minutes, that's awesome. So we have it set up so it's very friendly and it's also focused on solutions. You could friend us on Facebook. Anybody on Facebook? Well, if you are,
Okay.
friend us. And we also have a YouTube station you're going to hear about in just a little bit, and more social media stuff that Martha's going to go over. We do a lot of pre-conferences and things like that at ATIA, the Association for Assistive Technology Industries Association. And we just did that in Chicago. We're doing it again in Orlando. And then we also have some other tools, different information, and so I'll talk some more about that in just a minute. One of the, yes, passitoncenter.org. Passitoncenter.org. Thank you, Ruth. Yes, yes. So we also have this great tool called the IQ. It stands for Indicators of Quality for Assistive Technology Reuse. It's a self-assessment. You can go in there, you know, take, answer some questions, and I'll tell you more about that in just a few minutes. So we have a knowledge base that we created where we went out and we said, you know what, show us your intake form. Show us how you, your decision tree for whether you keep equipment or not. Show us how you market to folks who are seniors. Show us how you match equipment to folks who may not speak English. And so we started gathering all of these documents. They're in here. We've got a searchable database. Once again, our goal was to have like 300, resources that could be checklists and videos and all of that. We've got far exceeded that. We've got over 1,300 from across the country, and it's exciting to see how folks are sharing that information and learning and growing. I was on a webinar yesterday teaching a bunch of folks in California all about liability issues and reuse, and everybody kept remarking on how valuable that knowledge base really has been. So here's the group of folks that came up with the quality indicators that I was just discussing. We actually had this meeting over here at Georgia Tech, and so there we are. And it's folks literally from all over the country and leaders in this field and also in other fields of assistive technology. So here is this IQ ATR, Indicators of Quality, and it's very simple. You can go on there, log in, find out what it is that really does make a quality reuse program. And, are you sanitizing the equipment? A lot of people don't do that. They're just kind of cleaning it. And all of us have different ideas of what clean is, right? So, yeah. And usually I can tell the cleanliness of a reuse program as soon as I walk in. I can smell it. I'm like, woo! You need to work on this, cleanliness. But you can...
Are there standards around that?
Yes.
Yes.
UV and,
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. Depending on the technology. And so we're starting to put videos out about that. We've also done webinars all about cleanliness, sanitization, sterilization. One of the cool things about this tool is as you answer questions, depending on how you answer it, it'll give you resources immediately within the knowledge base. And it hopefully will help you grow. And then we're hoping this will be a loop where as you grow and you change and you develop your program a little bit more, then you'll give us more resources that we can use to further develop the network. And sure enough, that's happening. We're seeing where that loop is happening over and over, which is nice. So we've helped folks build business plans. Sustainability is extremely important, and so we've helped them with that. And Remedy is one of those, which is a program in Birmingham. And then we've created a basic outline for strategic plans and using DME, and that was in Dallas. So we've had literally thousands of folks come and spend some time. As you can see, the average length of session is 12 minutes, and people, as I said, that are in the web design business and are like, technical assistants, they're like, that's great. So our numbers are pretty impressive. We've also spent some time with folks, not just providing technical assistance from a distance, but really that hands-on, let's get together, let's get folks in a room and figure out what it is that people really need. And this is Joy, and I'm in this, the one taking the picture. This is in North Dakota and Fargo. We've done upwards of 17 of these summits, state summits. We've had over, actually almost every state and territory participate in our summits, which is great, where we get folks together. I love this quote by Margaret Mead, which is never doubt that a small group of thoughtful citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And we've seen that manifest again and again. And a lot of times people measure, their success by the size of folks, how many people showed up at your trainings and all of that. And what we have found, and Joy's going to cover the data in just a moment, that we can create incredibly positive, results just by working hands-on with a small group of folks, which is great. In the middle here is a picture of me with a guy, his name's Clayton, and he's from Arizona. I'm wearing the same outfit, as you can tell. I'm consistent. But anyway, so Clayton works in Arizona, and when I went out to do a reuse summit with the state of Arizona, primarily they were focused on working with folks who are aging. That was the topic of conversation. And every group that we worked with, that's who they wanted to serve. There was only one group in there that served folks that were under 18. Everybody else was, saying, okay, let's figure out service delivery for folks, and so we learned a lot, and I'd be happy to talk to you in more detail about that. But here's a list of different states that we just worked on this last year, and we're going to be adding Alaska and some other states this year. So here's just a photo of us at the pre-conference and at the conference at ATIA, where we have that strand. So if you want to learn more, you can go to the ATIA Assistive Technology Industry Association Conference in Orlando. And one of the sessions that I did in Chicago was one that Martha came up with, and it was looking at assistive technology and reuse for sensory-related disabilities. And that was a fascinating conversation with folks. We had a lot of people in there from Lighthouse. We had a lot of folks from the AAAs, the Area Agencies on Aging from around the country, and really focused on, what does that look like for folks who are aging? The other big initiative that we have is emergency management and assistive technology reuse. What's the role of assistive technology reuse in emergencies? And we're finding that it's an increasing role, it's a natural fit, it's something that happens often, and so we want to come up with a organized way of doing that. And so we presented with Chris Brand, who Ruth is representing today from Friends of Disabled Adults and Children, at the National Hurricane Conference. They've already talked to us about coming back and doing that bigger presentation again, and looking at functional needs for folks. And one of the topic areas that they said, hey, it's we really need to figure out how we can get folks who are aging in place into safe environments during emergencies, and we need to help them figure out what are go kits and all of that. So we're having conversations around that when it comes to specifically assistive technology. And then we've also had 2 regional summits where we had folks from every state in Region 4 was represented, and they have been working on state plans for assistive technology reuse within plugging that into their plans for emergency management. And I just got back from Philadelphia, where we had the Region 3 Summit. FEMA has been great about helping us and participating in this, and we're seeing where these state plans really are making a difference. So, and I'm going to turn it over to my friend Martha.
Yeah, the next couple of slides is about how we disseminate information. And so we're really big into social media, trying to get the information out there. We pretty much do everything except Twitter, but I think we'll probably start that soon. I've been in so many meetings lately where people just Twitter away throughout the conference, so I won't be surprised if Liz Prasad, our head person with our social media, will probably start that up too. But we do have a Pass It On Center blog that does just general topics and on just anything when it comes into relation to like hesitation, to how to repair something, up to also we do also have an emergency management blog as well. We're definitely on Facebook, so again, like us. And then we also have a YouTube channel, which is really cool. So if you just want to see how to really clean a wheelchair, we definitely have some cool videos on there. And we do a newsletter that comes out, I guess, quarterly. For the Pass It On Center activities. So if you're interested in that, you can give us your information. We'll make sure it's all electronic, so we'll make sure to put you on our list so you can get that.
Can you speak a little bit about your resources for your social media program, like staff, how many people are working with the social media aspect of your center?
Well, we all kind of work on it together, but Liz Prasad is our main person. We usually, like, Carolyn is taking pictures right now, and she usually just emails that right over to Liz, and Liz will be on right there.
We need to take a picture of you.
We all kind of, we all really work together, but Liz Prasad is the one that really maintains all the information. So, like, I'll find an interesting article, and I'm like, oh, well, I'll shoot it to her. I was like, do you think we can get this up on our Facebook? And she's really quick. She's really good.
And what about the video project?
The media project was really cool. We actually went, we had one of our contractors with Disability Connections in Macon. It's one of our Assistive Technology Resource Center. Michael Everett is a huge videographer, like on his spare time when he has
He's amazing.
So they did like a road show, which was really cool. So they went to San Antonio to Project MIN, which is leading the country in a lot of different ways with reutilization of durable medical equipment. They went up to St. Louis, for Paraquad, which is another huge reutilization area, and did some videos there. They've also went to D.C. They did some videos out there, and so we're out in
Virginia.
So they've traveled a lot of different places to do the video and to make sure that it's all good. And we actually had people send us videos, but some of the qualities weren't that well, so when we put it up online, it wasn't very good quality or wouldn't be able to be seen very well online. So we wanted to make sure when we did these videos that we put them up online, and you want to see how to properly sanitize a wheelchair, a power wheelchair per se, then you could actually see the details of going in and doing that. So we actually had them, we decided it would just be easier to do kind of like a road show with them to go around. So the videos are really, really cool. These are just the websites for our blogs for the AT reuse and the emergency management. Again, you can go straight to passitoncenter.org, and you saw the pictures of Facebook and YouTube and emergency management blog, and you can click right on there, and it'll take you directly to it as well. This is just a screenshot of the Pass It On Center blog. And this was just a screenshot of the blog on the emergency management. And here's our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/PassItOnCenter. We have, this says we only have like 996 views, but Carol and I were talking about that on the way over here. It's upwards over to 1,200, right? Of people that have viewed our videos. So it's pretty exciting just to see that people are actually, using it and looking at it. We have a 1-800 line that I answer a lot at our Tools for Life, and it's also our 1-800 line for our Pass It On Center. And it's kind of cool that we can actually, to refer people to these videos. Sometimes it's easier to see it. I'm very tactile, so I like to see things and touch things. So for me, I mean, I could read about cleaning a wheelchair, but for me, it was really helpful to actually watch the video. Not only did I learn how to clean a wheelchair, but I learned a lot more about a wheelchair. So it's kind of cool. So again, these videos showcase sanitization models, warehouse tours, success stories, and much more. And it's also accessible, so we've actually have them closed captioned as well. So we're still adding more videos. And this is just a screenshot of a video that you could find on YouTube. And this one is sanitizing non-electrical equipment. So it's a pretty cool video. And they're pretty short, to the point. It's not like you're going to watch a 30-minute video, but they usually run about 10 minutes. Pass It On Center Facebook, we've had 230 likes. 89 of those are active users each month on our Facebook page, so we're really proud about that. And then we've got, people in Canada and Italy that like us on Facebook, so that was pretty exciting. We're like, wow, yay. So, and I think Cameron has actually gotten gotten some calls from other countries about how to do reutilization. So
Yes.
hopefully we'll be able to travel out there and help them do it live and in person.
Today you might get 15 more likes.
Yes.
Yes.
And this is a screenshot of our Pass It On Center. And again, we like others too. We have Katia as one of our friends.
Yay.
So, I can encourage you, if you all have time to check out our Facebook. We get a lot of information on there and pictures as well. So, and if you do post something on our wall, we're really good about getting back in touch with you. Again, we also do the AT Reuse Loop, which is another newsletter that comes out about quarterly, and this is what it looks like. We also do it in PDF, but it's electronic. So if you would like to get this and learn a little bit more, give us your information, and we will definitely add you to our list to send that out. And this one had stuff about AT reuse in school, and then the 2011 Great Shakedown. Did y'all participate in that in March, where they did the Great Shakedown? Well, they did a earthquake drill in March with the 2011 Great Earthquake Shakedown. And it was interesting. We were having our emergency management conference at the same time, and we had people in power chairs. They were like, "Oh, what do we do? I mean, during an earthquake, what do you do if someone's in a power chair?" Well, apparently you're just supposed to cover them up with a cover. So Liz Prasad, who a lot of people know her, she does use a power chair, so we did put a cover on her, but I don't know if she felt protected or not. So, I never really thought about it. So.
It was a napkin.
It was a purple. It was a purple
And I
shawl.
think that picture might be up there.
It was
but,
a tablecloth.
Exactly. What do you do during an earthquake? If you're
That's
in a
what you're
power chair?
supposed to do. That's what Marcy Roth with the disability coordinator was saying. You need to cover somebody in a wheelchair. Don't try to take them out of their wheelchair, put them under the table. Just cover them with a blanket.
We've never had done that if we had not participated in the Great Shakedown, so that was interesting. Again, we do webinars. We do webinars every other month, which is usually the third.
Actually, every month.
Every
This
month,
one, yeah.
third Tuesday of the month. And we've had anywhere from 15 to 50 participants on any of our webinars. We also offer CEUs and CRC, Certified Rehab Counseling credits, so we've gotten a lot more participants that way, so people can actually get credits. We archive all our webinars, so if you miss it and you want to go back, or you just now learned about it today, you want to check out some of the webinars that we have. Here are some examples, like how to develop a continuity of operation plan. If you want to check that out, you can definitely go to the Pass It On Center website, and all our webinars are archived, both with the transcript as well as the audio as well. So it's pretty cool. So we've had many different ones, from going green in schools to people first language to emergency preparedness. So.
Okay, thank you, Martha, and thank you, Carolyn. And so a couple of other things that we're working on is Models Project to really sort of encourage AT reuse by looking at, and also understanding it by looking at the different models for AT reuse. I mean, there is no cookie cutter for these kind of programs whatsoever. There are a number of them that are sponsored through nonprofit organizations and centers for independent living. We've seen some in school systems. We've seen some where the umbrella organization is a state entity and they're contracting with a number of nonprofits that are sort of in a network. So it's been a struggle for us to say, okay, how do we categorize them? And we've come up with small, medium, and large and found that that relates to their budget, the number of devices they're putting out there, and it doesn't make any assumptions about, whether it's better to do it in a nonprofit organization or, a state agency or anything like that. So we're looking at that, and we're also doing quite a bit of research looking at return on investment. And we expect to be doing some more webinars about that a little bit later on. We've done some, but we're building on that process, and we've come up with a new model, which I won't go into it today, but it really kind of looks at everything, volunteer time, the value of that, and everything, and comes out with a return on investment. Why are we doing that? Because there are a number of people who say, oh yeah, we'll do reuse, throw up a shingle, and then all of a sudden they don't have the resources or the people or what have you to really make it happen, or the knowledge. And so we want to make sure that people are really looking at everything real cohesively. Although we do believe there are always enough resources, there are always enough people, there's always enough information out there. It's a matter of making everybody work in those teams and creating that synergy. And this is a picture of let's see, I believe that's a picture of
Actually, Project Mend.
Project Mend in San Antonio. And that's been one of our very successful programs out there, along with, you know, FODAC and Paraquad in Missouri, and then another very, very successful program in Virginia. In that particular model, there's a state program. They do subcontracts with nonprofits, but then they also partnered with Goodwill Industries, because they found that Goodwill was trying to refurbish stuff or just put stuff out there, wasn't very safe for them, but they're involved in the distribution. So, you know, of course, we're thinking, what about FedEx? What about UPS? What about other shipping industries, people where that's sort of like a natural thing that they do? How can we create even more effective national networks so that when there's a disaster like the tornadoes in Joplin, we have a really good network of response? And FODAC responded by sending, I don't know how many pallets of stuff over there. We also are looking at the 12 grantees that we worked with to look at what they plan to do, what their outcomes were, what are the best practices that they identified, successful practices, and how do we know that they're successful. So we'll be developing sort of a final report, and I hate to call it a final report because we see this effort as continuing, but in terms of the lessons learned from all those 12 grantees and where we go, and how can we use that in educating other programs on a continuing basis, training, and also legislative advocacy. Very, very important. If you look at some of the data, and this was developed by a system called the National Information System for AT, and it's now being operated through RSA, so if you tried to Google that, I don't think you're going to get anything right now. But it is information that all the state AT programs like Tools for Life are required to report on every year. And you remember from earlier we talked about how all these programs, many of them are doing reuse activities. So we've been required to report for a number of years. And I'm going to give you just a quick little snapshot to give you some ideas of the incidence of this, the prevalence of this happening, and also the estimated cost savings of reuse activities. And if you look at 2006, when we first started looking at this data, there were reported a little bit under 5,000 recipients getting reused items. All of a sudden it jumped in the report for 2010 to about 27,610 recipients. Now part of it's because there were more reuse activities going on. Part of it had to do with data reporting. But a part of it was just, you know, people began to see this is on the map, we need to do more of it, and we need to make that happen. If you look at the number of devices, the numbers aren't the same. And why is that? Because there's some recipients that may need 3 different kinds of things, or 4. So you have a higher number of devices, and it shot all the way up to almost 36,000 in 2010. And that's just with the state AT programs. So there are other programs that are listed on that database, the program locator, the map of the U.S., that aren't a part of this system. Many of them are, but there's some that aren't listed. So this is just, you know, it's a pretty good idea as to what's going on, but it surely is not everything that's going on. Okay, so if we look at the cost savings, and this is based on a report from the program as to what a consumer, somebody taking a device, what the estimate would be that they would have to pay if they had to buy it new. And were we factoring in 10% less? A lot of the programs were factoring in 20% less than manufacturer's sales price. And so we came up with all those devices, and this is 2010 data, of a little under $18 million that were saved through this. Now this is not a return on investment figure by any means, because it doesn't take into account all the costs that you have to figure in, the value of services, things like that. But it gives you a picture as to, you know, this is kind of the elephant in the living room. I want to give you a personal example because I know that Claudia talked about the dreams of people, and I'm sure Carolyn has others that she could share. One of the things that really resonated with me was an example that came through Friends of Disabled Adults and Children. And there was an individual who had a spinal cord injury. He was using a sip and puff wheelchair system that cost over $25,000. No, the cost of the system was very, very high. His copay was going to be over $25,000 on that system. It was time to replace it. Wasn't eligible for Medicaid, wasn't eligible for Medicare, too young for Medicare. Didn't have, he had insurance, but he had to pay this as copay. Not very good insurance. Didn't have the money. What do you do? On the fly, people from the Shepherd Center and the Rehab Engineering Department called FODAC. Chris Brand, the executive director, answers the phone. He says, let me check. I think we just got one in, exact size, exact manufacturer, exactly what this guy's been using. Had been used maybe a couple of times. They replaced the tubing and got it over. There's a big issue in the country about whether or not reuse programs should be doing what is called complex rehab, meaning stuff that's really high end. You don't want to take business away from the manufacturers, but what do you do when somebody doesn't have the money to pay for it? And that's part of why there's been such a great interest in reuse. It's by no means the only reason why. It doesn't mean, that example doesn't mean that Medicare or Medicaid ought to officially embrace it, because it's very complicated. There are many issues. But it gives to you at least a picture as to, a lot of the people who are going to reuse programs have no way to pay for devices, and there's some other reasons too. We'll jump back to that in a second. The environments, if we look at where reuse is happening, you can see a huge amount is to help people in community living. These are not people necessarily who are looking for employment, small percentage there, education, a little under 10%. We also measure why do people go to reuse and only afford AT through the statewide program, the reuse program. It was only available through the statewide program. It was available through other systems, but the system was too complex. Interesting, right? How many of you have looked at your insurance benefits and you're going, what? What does this mean? And if you're getting close to being maybe Medicare eligible, it's like, ye gads, this is really hard. You need navigators for all this stuff. And so we also look at consumer satisfaction. Highly satisfied, almost 86%, satisfied 14%, somewhat satisfied 0.33%, and then very few people who weren't satisfied by this. And so, pretty good information there. So, Carolyn, would you like to add anything? You, Martha?
Sure.
Jump right in. And then
Just one other little story. I also see this as a personal thing. And we had promised my mom and dad that they would not live in a nursing home. And my mom has Huntington's disease. Everybody's familiar. Anybody familiar with that? Neurodegenerative, genetic. And both my uncles and my grandmother have died of Huntington's. And so we had promised my mom no nursing home. And my dad, who has Addison's and all kinds of other things happening, my partner calls him a train wreck, medical train wreck, had a lot of things going on too. And we were trying to figure out how can we keep them at home, because that's what we wanted to do. So we had to create an accessible environment, which we were able to do. But we weren't able to afford all of the AT we needed. And so some of those things that were saving our backs are those, the lifts. Hoyer lift specifically is the one we got. We got that from Friends of Disabled Adults and Children. We would not have been able to afford that otherwise. We could get a hospital bed for one of my parents, but the other one didn't qualify. So we were able to get hospital beds for both, specific kinds, through reuse. And so personally, I appreciate the reuse efforts that happen. My mom actually used for a little while a speech device that was reused. And we knew that it was only a little period of time that she was going to use it, so why spend $6,000 on this when she was only going to use it for maybe a year? And that got back into another community. Somebody else is using that very successfully. So reuse makes a lot of sense. That's just a personal experience of being able to, fulfill my parents' dream of being able to live and die at home. My dad passed in March. We were like, that was peaceful and good, and that was good, that he was able to do that. Wouldn't have happened had we not had, those supports. And that's what we find is if we can toggle resources and help folks, meet those goals. Who would have said, my goal is to die at home? But that was my dad's goal. So we see this manifest again and again. The youngest people we've been working with, 6 months old, oldest 104, and helping people just realize these dreams and meet those goals. So what questions do you have? What points of collaboration? What do you think?
question.
Oh, actually, it's a silly question, but you mentioned that people from Canada like you
Yeah.
very much, and I just got to think your program works very well in the United States, supporting people in the United States. Have you ever done something like internationally?
Yes.
We would, yes.
We actually Reboot is a computer reuse program that we started here in Georgia, and we looked at different models. We actually worked very closely with the National Christina Foundation, and we created a charter in 1997 and mapped out a plan. And we actually had data that showed, proof of concept. Paris, there's a Reboot Paris that's very active, and there's also a Reboot in Brazil. So we've seen where you can take the model and actually apply it, and it works. Actually, I hate to say it, but the Reboot in Paris, and there's also one in Ireland, the one in Ireland does significantly more reuse of computers than the one in Georgia. So it's interesting to see how the model, when you give it to other folks who can be creative and adapt it. One other thing is we've also seen where people can take technology and make it very specific. If you have a good model, you can plug in different technologies. And we've seen that nationally, where, for example, somebody, the wheelchair needs in Africa are very different than the wheelchair needs in, Atlanta. Just the type of terrain you're dealing with and all of that. So we've seen where we can actually take a reuse model, adapt it to the wheelchairs, modify those wheelchairs, and make something really happen. So.
Well, as a matter of fact, there was back in the 2000, I think it was, or the 1990s conference on reuse. One of the groups that we saw a video about was a group of women in Uganda. And there's a gentleman, and his name I can't remember, out of California, who's done a lot of international work and works with local materials and tries to capture best practices. And these women actually built wheelchairs out of bicycle wheels. When you think about it, that's a pretty good deal. And these were all women with disabilities and wanted to help their kids. In Canada, very interesting, they were doing reuse more formally before we were in this country as far as we know it. There also, when I did a lot of research just to see what's out there in terms of the literature, and there were only like about 3 articles that had anything to do with reuse back in 2006. Now we know we at least have one more because our program did one journal article in the Assistive Technology Outcomes and Benefits. But this group in Canada was doing, actually did some usability kinds of work with people who are using reuse. So we need a lot more research in that end. The other thing that might be potential for collaboration is we know that with our Reboot program, there were some people at Georgia Tech who actually went out and redesigned the whole way equipment was processed through their system. And that was very, very helpful. And I know Claudia had some students who were,
It was a short project,
and you had your baby quite quickly, and
so we tried to partner to conduct a participatory design project with the Pass It On Center and the Housing for community.
Yes.
So the goal was for my students to take the technology and in a way redesign it and re-adopt it to a new use, and having older adults to participate in the process of redesigning that product. Well, it didn't come out that right the part that they were adopting the technology. They did it very good with Housing for, but they never clicked in adopting the technology from your center.
right.
So,
But I think there's
there's room for improvement.
right, and I think that, the whole process of doing industrial design and looking at, if you've got a reuse facility out there, how do things flow through the whole system, and what could you do to make it more efficient as a process?
Call that reverse supply chain.
Oh,
Of
good.
course, they have a great school here. It's
Oh.
Industrial engineering. It's the top industrial engineering school in the country.
Well,
And so there's a whole industry around that. I'm
Here
sure
you
they
go.
can provide a lot of help.
good, great. Well, there are a lot of ways that we would be very happy to collaborate, and just wanted to mention that we are hoping that this agreement will be finalized very soon, but we're expecting to move on campus, actually with Alternative Media Access Center, hopefully very soon. And so we're excited about becoming better friends with everybody. And yeah.
Where will those offices be?
We're off, AMAC is off of Mean Street. Yeah.
We had another perfect example of an AT reuse just this week with a young lady with cerebral palsy whose house was burned down in a fire. She lost all of her AT equipment. She had a power wheelchair, very highly specialized chair for her needs. And she is Medicaid, but so she's eligible for another one. However, the process is going to take till probably January or February.
Mm-hmm.
So in the interim, she needed something to be able to get around. So it was another one of those situations where we just happened to have the chair that was the right fit, and we had someone from the DME company come out and help see her. And you may have seen it was on Fox 5, right? So we
Yeah.
have to get a little media attention there.
Excellent.
But, yeah, that's another perfect example of how this reuse program can help folks.
Right.
And,
Absolutely.
certain parts of the assistive technology for seniors
Mhm.
started in a high reuse. You think of durable medical equipment, and because of funding and because of the typically short period of time some people need that, it's a weekly rental program, and they, oxygen tanks and wheelchairs, and then all that stuff goes back and is refurbished and put right back to use the next week.
Mhm.
So some of that started off very efficient from the beginning, and that's the big industry. But then as you get closer and closer to the technology and the expensive stuff, that whole reuse model really seems like it breaks down,
Mhm.
and there's less of that going on. I mean, I love to hear the success stories like that one, but you don't see the same kind of wholesale approach that you see with durable medical equipment.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a real challenge.
Yeah.
As you look as far out as you can see with
Right.
increased demands on services from government
And less
decreased
money.
ability to fund it.
Absolutely.
They're going to have to, and there's some great stories out there. Right here in Atlanta, this is not assistive technology, but right here in Atlanta, Dish Networks, the big satellite TV company,
Mhm.
they have a huge facility in Swanee
Mhm.
that they take all those set-top boxes
Mhm.
as people move or change providers, and that goes in it's a quarter of a million square feet.
Wow.
600 people working every day.
Wow.
And they take the equipment in, and they take off the plastic molding, tear it down, test it, refurbish any electronics, put new molding around it so it looks brand new, repackage it so it looks brand new, and then that goes out to the next user at probably 15% of the cost of building a new one.
Do they tell the new users that they have one that is using recycled parts?
There might be a sticker on there
Okay.
somewhere, but
It's interesting.
it's worked into a
Mm.
$39 a month fee.
Wow.
So there's a benefit to the user. They're happy about the lower price. We didn't fill the landfill up.
Right. Right.
Okay?
Amen.
I mean, just go, and there's 600 people working here in Atlanta. I mean, so you go through that, it's really a lot smarter way to do business when their set-top boxes for standard TV haven't changed very much in 10 years.
Right.
So these are the kind of things you'd like to think could get and they do all of that because it provides a return on investment.
Mhm.
They're not doing that strictly.
It's absolutely.
Because they're Sierra Club
Right.
partners, they're doing it because it makes great business sense.
Mhm.
It seems like over time we're going to have to find those same approaches in the assistive technology, especially the high-tech.
I think so too, but yet it's a very slippery slope right now because there was in New Jersey a while back, and it was early 2001 or so, and a person there was a lawsuit because there was a provider that was doing reused equipment, and the parent didn't have a choice, and this was Medicaid funded. It was a really bad scenario. And there was an improper reuse of this particular type of device, and a child actually lost his life. And so a lot of the complex rehab providers are very wary of the reuse issue. It's not just about taking business away from them. They're worried about all those kinds of things that you think about. You know, when do you know if a piece of metal has had so much stress on it that it really shouldn't be reused is a basic example. So there are a lot of things that we're looking at there. Our position is that if there are groups like Medicare or Medicaid, and there are some programs that are working very effectively with Medicaid in a very interesting way, but that the consumer needs to have choice. You know, you need to give them some choice. Are you going to have something that's a good, safe, effective, reutilized device, or are you going to, you know, or do you want to have something that's new? Well, then that becomes kind of funny because there are not caps on how much an individual would get with Medicaid. I mean, they can't really do that per se.
But so many
So,
of those, and you're right, liability is a big issue, especially in this country. But so many of those decisions were made in the mindset of an ever-increasing supply of funding.
right.
Forever.
That's right.
And you only have to look across the Atlantic at Spain and Portugal and Italy,
Greece and
every one of those
Ireland and
and all of that is
Yep.
coming to a city-state near you. I mean, I think everybody noticed or followed that the biggest county in Alabama filed
Yep.
bankruptcy last week.
yep, and Harristown,
Harrisburg,
Harrisburg.
Pennsylvania, the capital Pennsylvania, filed bankruptcy
Right.
2 weeks ago.
right,
And all that's coming.
right.
And so the notion that you can just put new stuff in everyone's home, and when they're through with it, we just throw it away,
Yeah.
that whole notion is going to break down.
Absolutely.
Just-
Yeah.
you can't do it.
So it sounds like there's so many excellent examples from industry, like your, you know, that one way in working with partners at Georgia Tech would be to really look at, you know, is there a way to look at this from a good business standpoint where the vendors who provide this kind of complex rehab equipment and other kinds of equipment, it's got to be a win-win, we think, for everybody, the consumer, the vendor, the reuse
And
programs.
that's the hard
and-
part to figure out.
Yeah.
And you cannot compete with the existing distribution chain,
Right.
because they will win every time.
Oh, yeah.
And you've got to
Yeah.
respect
Yeah.
the profit margins.
Right.
That's why so much of this stuff leaves the country. You watch, for example, there's huge recycling on cell phones. And it leaves the United States. These things are collected at all these AT&T stores. We drop them in there. You know, it was a $300 phone that some new faceplate came out, so we want a new one, so we sign up for another 2-year deal. And we throw a $300 phone away that works perfectly. And those things are rehabbed, and then a lot of that goes to third world.
And the same thing happens with developing countries and computers and also wheelchairs.
And they
Um,
avoid competing with the U.S. distribution, which is tough, because you're going to get sued. And they also avoid the litigation issues.
Right.
largely.
There you go.
We have seen where there are some models where folks have been paying attention to the trend, and they've been paying attention for about, you know, upwards of 10 years. Freedom Scientific is an example of that with their PackMate. Is everybody familiar with that? Refreshable braille display. It's a pretty expensive device, and they started reclaiming those, not sending them overseas or anything like that, and then getting them back up to their standards and then reselling them. The thing is, they don't market that program, but if you're in the loop, you know that program exists. When people say, oh, I just can't afford it, then they'll bring out, well, we do have this other program. So yes, and also we've worked with some groups of vendors. There's a vendor that actually you visited down in Tampa, Custom Mobility, that has been doing this for upwards of 8 years, where they are taking equipment back in. It's called Misfit.
It's a
No,
terrible
Mismatch.
name.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
bad name.
it's-
What is it called? Something funny.
Misfit or misfit.
Which is not a great name, and we talked to them a little bit about the language there. But it's interesting to see how they've been able to work that into their market. And, you know, 7 years ago, people didn't really want that used equipment. Now they do. So we're starting to see the trend.
Right, and,
Well,
and
see, that would be the Braille.
Yes.
That would be a great success story
Mhm.
for you to work into.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
3 or 4 like that to show other
Hmm.
other high-tech companies how it can be accommodated.
We also have some examples within the AAC, Alternative Augmented Communication world. When folks have ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and other neurodegenerative disease processes happening where they're reclaiming, get them back up, and then get them back out. So.
and then the groups that have worked with Medicaid, one in particular in Kansas, has done a fabulous job. And in working with, in fact, Medicaid even cited their partnership in a transformation of Medicaid agencies publication that they did, and other Medicaid agencies are kind of listening to what they've done there. And what the state AT program did is really a tracking system, an inventory tracking system, where they look at, they get information about everyone who's purchased Medicaid equipment or where Medicaid equipment has been purchased, and they work with the providers to assure that, number one, the person got what they had needed and requested and so on. And then any Medicaid equipment is stickered so that the program learns about it in the end. And Medicaid pays them to do this. It's almost like more fraud control process. But then they use this funding to reimburse vendors to take equipment that is ready to be reutilized and repurpose it. And then they assign that to the people in their network. The vendors are actually paid to do the refurbishing, so they're part of that.
Encouraging. I mentioned Dish, and of course that equipment's never sold, it's leased. And so that's totally within their system. But Dell's outlet business is growing, and that's refurbished. And then the thing that was amazing to me, I would say Apple probably has the most highly regarded brand in the world, and they've begun through AT&T and their partners to sell the refurbished iPhones at $99.
It's really the business model.
Right,
Yeah.
and iPads. And so that's actually encouraging. I mean, that shows you even a really premier brand can find a way to not throw all that stuff in the landfill.
That would be good for some of the presentations that we do. We have one called the business case for AT reuse, where we get into return on investment, and taking a look at other industries that have done that might be a really good way to kind of shore up that presentation.
And I loved it. And here's some examples
Yeah.
like
That's
what was the
great.
company with the
Freedom Scientific, yeah. Great comments. And we do have a national task force. And in fact, Katia's represented on that, and very happy about that. And if there are other people who can bring sort of that business model thinking into what we're doing, we really welcome that kind of conversation. This year we'll be meeting, just to save expenses, probably not a face-to-face meeting, but we have different work groups who work on different projects, and it's a lot of fun because it's a sort of a mix and blending of skills from many different folks. So, yes. Hey, Karen.
Hi. Question. I was wondering if you ask people when they're donating stuff why they're not using it anymore. 'Cause it seems like you might be on the edge of a whole lot of abandonment data there.
Ah, good comment. Carolyn?
Yeah, some of the programs actually do ask, why are you not using it? And what we found is that it usually is related to either growth, somebody has outgrown it, or that somebody has passed. So that's often where a lot of the equipment's coming in. But some of it is also, just that they wanted to try something before they bought it. And so they wanted to try it not for a couple of months or a couple of weeks or a day. They want to try it for maybe a year. And so it's more of that stopgap, and then they were able to, turn that in and then get something else. But yes, I agree with you about that. I was talking to a guy who was, and this was actually in Philadelphia, and he was talking about, wondering the same thing. Is it abandonment? Why are people, returning some of this stuff? But it's usually for those reasons. But that's a great question.
We have done a study over the past year where we looked at people at FODAC, Friends of Disabled Adults. The other end of the question is, why are you looking at reused equipment? What was your experience? And it required layers of work because sometimes people did not know, were they eligible for Medicaid, Medicare, and one person hadn't seen a doctor in 10 years. And so, that was very interesting information. It kind of shored up what we know, that a lot of people find the system too complex and just get fed up with it.
Just one other about the abandonment issue. The other thing that we have heard over and over, and I remember when I started working with the Reboot and building that program and being over at FODAC, is that a lot of times people are so attached to their assistive technology, they love the idea of it being reused, so they don't want it to go to a landfill. So there are people that come in, and we've got a webinar where we talk about how do you receive equipment, because you want to honor that. You don't want to just say thanks and toss it, because they're like, that was my voice for 10 years, or that was my brain, don't do that. So, so it is interesting how a lot of people, it just makes them happy to know somebody else will use it.
They wanted to go to someone that will use it. We have that a lot.
Oh,
They
yeah.
often even want to know the name. It's kind of like an organ transplant where they're like, well, I
That's
want to
right.
meet the person who
Right.
got this.
But you probably have to be careful about promising.
You do.
Oh, we don't promise that.
Yeah.
That's right.
No.
Well, in fact,
Chances are we're going to scrap it.
one of the allied issues here is just getting enough good equipment donated in. Gently used equipment is the ideal thing that reuse programs like to get. A lot of gently used equipment. And one of our partners found that they had to do this very, very carefully, very tactfully, but funeral homes were a good place to go to because people would often ask funeral homes, gee, my dad's died and I've got this equipment and, I don't know what to do with it. And so they actually did, the program actually did some training of people who are going to be going out and working with the families who did say that they had equipment to donate, and they got great equipment. They also got great donated equipment if they found that if they work with the Red Cross and set up booths and just, talk with people going through to donate blood. Why? Who knows? But this is the same program that works with Medicaid with the stickering program, and yet 94% of the equipment that they receive come through private donations, funeral homes, Red Cross lines, things like that. Very interesting. Not the sticker program. Yes?
First, I know you mentioned good practices like sanitation and cosmetic things like reupholstery.
Right.
But is there a national set of standards that is out there that basically says that this, when something is reused, that we recommend this process? Or does the manufacturers publish, kind of like, let's use Boeing as an example. Boeing publishes volumes of information about hours of service of airplanes, what needs to be checked, when, and that's why
Excellent
things
question.
keep flying. So is
Excellent.
there an analogy to
Yes, and that was one of those big questions that we looked at. What are some of the regulatory issues around that and so forth? And what we found was that the manufacturers of durable medical equipment have cleaning standards, all kinds of standards that we, refer to there. We looked at whether or not and we didn't see anything through the FDA per se about, although there's a lot on device recall and reutilization there, it doesn't go a layer deeper, and we didn't want to go there, really, So we have a number of things that we've pulled together from CDC, sanitization standards, FDA, OSHA. There's some information, I believe, from OSHA as well. And I've put together some guidelines that programs can follow for things like sanitization that relate to the manufacturer requirements and all of these pieces, and steps that they should take each step along the way. We did not want to put ourselves into any situation of being a certifying body. Lots of liability.
everything that you provide is as is, because you don't know if there's
People sign off on, I'm accepting this as a piece of reused equipment. All the programs do have that. We've also recommended that they get an insurance rider that covers, what they're doing. I know that FODAC has a substantial one. And, the training, policies and procedures, we have...
There's warranty, so if you're getting a refurbished computer, there's what, 90-day warranty.
It's a
If it breaks or
90-day
stops
warranty.
working, you can bring it back in. So there is some
Right.
of that stuff.
And really, so we recommend to programs is you really need to look at all these things on the knowledge base. We've got a document where an attorney went in and looked at FDA standards. We talked with manufacturers, and we really worked a lot on this one document to give people the pointers of the things they need to do to mitigate their liability, and to also be sure that they're doing something that is safe and appropriate and effective. And if anybody has any question about whether or not something should be reused, we say, don't do it. Just,
maybe this is going too far, but like when you sell an airplane, in theory, Boeing is responsible for that airplane.
Right.
No matter, as long as it's in service anywhere, their
Right.
responsibility probably never ends.
well,
Does the manufacturers,
Yes.
when does
Well-
their responsibility
very interesting with that. The manufacturer, one of the things that we have recommended people do is they follow the manufacturer's recall list, okay? And that the program makes sure that anybody who takes this equipment keeps informed with when the manufacturer has issued a recall. So I think implicitly the manufacturer recognizes that if they don't put out their recall lists or advise people of hazards, that that would put them in a situation. We've also advised that people not put their stickers like FODAC over anything that covers up what the manufacturer, you know, the labels there. And, you know, so that's really how, and so I know that people are letting folks know when the manufacturer has a recall. Not all programs, but it's what we've advised them to really do.
There's also manufacturers offer training for techs.
And certification.
And, so FODAC and a lot of the other reuse centers around the country send their techs to these trainings, or they'll host a training and then they get to have the training for free for their techs. Yeah. So we are finding and recommend folks get the technology back to manufacturer standards, and that's, you know, key. I did a whole presentation yesterday on this specific topic, and it's a webinar. We'll be posting it to our website in the next couple of days. But yeah, it is. It's fascinating, really, and all these things that we hadn't thought about. One of the things we are encouraging whenever we go to the state summits and, you know, help people kind of think through these things is checking to see if they have a Good Samaritan law, and is AT reuse covered in that. And we're starting to see where people are starting to push that in their states where AT reuse would be covered. Because
it's not covered right now, because when we looked at the Good Samaritan laws, it has to do with somebody helping somebody alongside the roadway, that kind of thing. But it is a way to, it could be, yeah,
Texas is one,
yeah,
North Dakota talked about doing that in theirs, so, and
which is
California's
good.
talking about it. So we'll see. Any other questions? Was this helpful?
Yes.
Good, great. We know you're coming from many different backgrounds here, and we weren't sure, but we're thrilled that you are here, and we would love to come back and spend time with you talking about our state AT program, our assistive technology resource centers, anything on AT apps. We're in the process of working on development of apps for AT. Very excited about that, and know that there are lots of people here who are interested, maybe share some of those interests. So thanks so much.
Thank you all.